the most of them.
Yeah, I think I got it. Thank you. All right. Hey, welcome everyone. So good morning. Let me see. I've got a few announcements here before we get started with this morning's speakers and announcements from the rest of the Master Gardener board. As usual, I think most people have done it. If you haven't, renamed yourself to a first and last name. If you could do that, that'd be great. If you need help with that, we have our tech team here today to help you out. We've got Tina and we've got Dick, and they're willing to help you out if you need that assistance. Um, I only have a few quick announcements here. One is we're starting off with kind of the new year. So there are going to be some new volunteer opportunities as well as some regular volunteer opportunities we do each year. And you'll see announcements on those. So I'm excited. There's going to be a few new volunteer opportunities. You'll see more details coming out shortly here. In the newsletter, of course, and our IO listserv that Katie and Carol put out. Um, Now, I know it's real early in the year, but please make sure as you do these activities to enter your hours. Try and avoid like what sometimes happens at the end of the year. A lot of people put in a number of hours at the last minute, and it just puts a bit of pressure on getting everything entered in a timely manner. Puts a lot of pressure on Katie. And some of you may have heard that Katie Mackay injured herself. I think walking her dog, she broke both her shoulders. But true to form, Katie is still getting things done. I think she has someone there helping her write some emails. It's very, very limited, but she's still doing some correspondence, still doing some things on the internet. I'm not sure how she's doing it. Just getting someone in there, I think, help her. But she's going to be kind of on the mend for quite some time. I don't know the exact details. The other thing is that if you do continuing ed events, please enter them in advance. And one of the it may seem like, well, why do I got to do it in advance? Well, one reason is I think it helps. It kind of gets you into the mindset of putting things in advance rather than waiting to the end of the year, where often people put in their hours and they're continuing ed all at the end of for events that occurred weeks or months earlier. That's always been the policy of putting continuing ed events in there. I pretty much approve most things. Some few things in there might be on the fringe or might be something promoting a sort of a political action or type thing. But other than that, if you could put your continuing ed hours in advance, and I appreciate that. It's a large number of volunteers we have here. So I know I appreciate, and I think Katie does too, and the rest of us here on the board. So if you could put your hours in advance, or in as your hours in as you volunteer throughout the year, we appreciate it. So at that point, I think I'm going to stop and I'm going to hand it over to Linda. Thank you, Linda.
Excellent. Good morning, everybody. A few announcements. The first one is about Master Gardener dues. First of all, thank you to all the Master Gardeners who support our activities by making a $25 dues contribution. Please make your contribution checks for $25 payable to the University of Maryland, and you can send them to Montgomery County Master Gardeners at 18410 Lancaster Road, Durwood, Maryland. And I'll put this in the chat so you don't have to worry. And I think pretty soon we'll have an Eventbrite link for you that if you'd like to pay it by Eventbrite, you can do that as well. Our second announcement is about the seed. The seed is looking for editor and design editor. So the seed, is our monthly Master Gardener newsletter, and we're looking for enthusiastic Master Gardeners to fill the editor and design editor positions starting in 2025. So that means you'd spend a whole year getting help learning the job during 2024. There's one editor position and two design editor positions, and I think they have another 10 people or so that work on it, so you'd be in good company. Qualifications and duties for the two positions are posted in the latest February edition of the Seed, as well as in the announcements section of the monthly membership meeting. So Carol will have that posted. If you're interested in the editor position, please contact Desiree Yang. If you're interested in the design editor position, please contact Deborah Petro or Julie Super. And you can find their numbers in the VMS. The second announcement for today is from Plant Clinic for Plant Clinic coordinators. This is an announcement specifically for all Plant Clinic coordinators. Your Plant Clinic co-chairs need details for the 2024 plant clinics by February 4th in order to include them in the Master Gardener printed brochure. So they're looking for your location, the days you meet, and the times that you meet. Please review and edit, complete, or confirm the details of your plant clinic information as soon as possible. And you're sending that email to Ann Claxton. If you have any questions, you can contact Ann Claxton or Ifana Ali. Okay. Third announcement. I'm kind of partial to this one. Wild Ones meeting at Glenstone. Linda Barrett, that's me, will be speaking at the Wild Ones meeting at Glenstone on February 10th. That's Saturday, next Saturday, a week from Saturday, from 10:30 to noon on the Baywise program. This meeting will be at Sandy Branch House of Glenstone, which is at 12300 Glen Road. There's plenty of parking along the driveway. The house is open at 10, but the meeting starts at 10:30, and we have to leave by noon. The easiest way to get there is out River Road to right on Piney Meeting House Road. I and the Wild Ones folks would love to see you at the meeting. Please contact or please go to their website. I think there's a registration for them. Okay. Oh, and Steve has allowed this meeting to be counted as 1 hour of continuing education credit. Next announcement, the Potomac Village Garden Club Tour. The Potomac Village Garden Club will be giving a tour of 6 of their members' gardens on May 4th from 10 to 4. If you're interested, please save the date on your calendar. If you want more information, you can contact Linda Rieger. That sounds like a fun tour. And also the 2024 Maryland House and Garden Pilgrimage Tour will take place on May 18th. And this year will feature 11 homes and gardens in Potomac, including the oldest home in Montgomery County, the oldest home in Potomac Village, and Glenstone. If interested, see the February written announcement for the website. All right, that's it for our announcements today. I'm going to turn it over to Gloria for our recognitions.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I want to say to Dick, I'm not seeing. Okay, now I am. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I could see my own slides. So thank you for that. First of all, I want to thank everyone who emailed photos, helped with technical support, or helped with this presentation in any way. A lot of people were involved. So thank you very much. It was greatly appreciated. Um, our next slide, please. We want to welcome our new master gardeners. They're new to us anyway. Elena Furman and Liza Collery, class of 2020. Unfortunately, we didn't receive Liza's photo in time to add it this morning. I'm sorry for that. And Holly Larish, class of 2023. These ladies have completed their 40 hours of volunteering and have been actively participating for some time now. But many of us have not had the opportunity to meet them yet, and we look forward to getting to know them as we work together in months to come. Next slide, please. And today we are introducing chairs and co-chairs of committees, activities, and task forces. A lot of people will be recognized. Um, Plant Clinic's co-chairs are Fauna Ali and Ann Claxton. And I learned there are currently 12 plant clinics around the county. Urban gardening co-chairs are Ann Claxton and Lana Shea. Urban gardening is held the first Saturdays of April through November at the Farm Fresh Farmers Market in Silver Spring. And community events chair is Mo Thomas. And some of the community events include Earth Day events. There were 7 of those last year. Also, community festivals and working with community partners such as Holy Cross Germantown Hospital. And there are many others. Next slide, please. Melissa Siegel and Mary Ellen Barnhart are co-chairs of In the Garden with Melissa. This is a show that's recorded and it reports on Montgomery County Master Gardener programs and gardening issues in our area. Baywise, we've just heard a bit about that from Linda. Baywise is co-chaired by Linda Barrett and Ann Claxton. And so far, since 2021, about 30 to 35 to 40 properties have been certified by this as Baywise by this group. And that's great. Great news. Next slide, please. Food Rescue and Gleaning is co-chaired by Robin Kokelnick and Kat Kahn. Here you see them on the left with some of their beautiful produce. And a lot of people in our county do benefit from this effort. Youth gardening at White Oak Youth Center is led by Sue Kuklovich and Emma Brennan. If you don't know, it's an after school and summer camp program that's held for grades K through 5. And approximately 50 students participate in this activity. Next slide, please. Therapeutic horticulture is chaired by Lisa Diamond, Wendy Bann, and Paula Brooks. And here you see them sharing information during a meeting in November of Therapeutic Horticulture Master Gardeners. TH, as we call it, has 15 programs in 12 assisted living and healthcare facilities around the county. It's a big program. Next slide, please. Nature Forward co-chairs are Jenny Brown and Janet Owens. Gardens they care for are the Wood End Learning Garden and the Blair Native Plant Garden, and these are located in Chevy Chase. Durwood Demo Garden. Oh, we're still on that one. I'm sorry. Durwood Demo Garden, we're all familiar with, is co-chaired by Mary Jo Egan and Susan Kirby. This amazing garden at our Ag History Farm Park is utilized by many groups and visited by the general public throughout the year. And we love it. Next slide, please. Yeah. The Bill Dawson Garden is a historical medical herb garden. It's located at the Bill Dawson House in Rockville. And this garden and its activities are chaired by Betty Chinchi. And below her, you'll see Pamela Bates. She chairs the Fairgrounds Demo Garden. And as most of you know, it's our greatest garden outreach held during the Montgomery County Fair. And lots of you are involved in that. So next is the U.S. Oak Garden at Walter Reed Hospital. That's chaired by Mikola Barnes, Edith Voller, and Yokomo Mura. They're not exactly in that order, but they're across the top of your slide. This garden is utilized and enjoyed by the patients there. And I think there's one more on that previous slide. I'm sorry. Can we go back? Okay. And at the bottom, wearing a hat and an interesting shirt, um, the National Library of Medicine, known as NLM Demo Garden, is on the grounds of the National Institutes of Health, and it is chaired by Sandy Ochapente. Now, next slide, please. Close Encounters with Agriculture, known to many as CEWA, as you know, is held for fourth graders in the fall when they come to the Ag History Farm Park. And that's led by Alan Tarumte, Claudio Silva, and Mark Traversa. Garden Discovery Day is co-chaired by Terry Valente and Pat Musey. And Taffy Turner and Mike Welch will be co-chairs of the Harvest Festival. Both of these events offer a host of fun and educational experiences. Speakers Bureau is led by Cindy Langstaff and Deborah Kleinberg. And social events and hospitality are led by Carol Kosery and Linda Barrett. And as you've heard previously, the Seed newsletter editor is Desiree Yang. And we enjoy and look forward to each publication of the Seed. Public Relations Chair is Ann Kelly. Computers and Tech Team is led by Chuck Delaney. And Bev Carger is our Social Media Chair. The Volunteer Management System, known as VMS, is maintained and updated by Katie Mackay. It's a big job, and she does it so well. We're all wishing you well, Katie, if you're listening. Steve Dubik is the task forces leader, and he oversees all task forces. And speaking of task forces, the awards task force is led by Michael Pariser. The fall conference chair is Ryan Haley, and she'll be leading that. And the garden educator co-chairs are Pam Hossamer and Carol Kosery. And in conclusion, this is our last slide. The website and multimedia co-chairs are Renew Murick and Willie Bonella. And the Mission and Forest Task Force chairs are Mandy Gordon and Renew Murick. And a big thank you to all of those who were recognized today. We appreciate your leadership, and we couldn't do without you. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Gloria. All right, we're moving on into our meeting. Today, I get the pleasure of introducing our speaker, who's our very own Montgomery County Master Gardener, Eric Wenger. Eric is entering his 44th year in the lawn and landscape green industry. He's been an IPM specialist for turf grass since 1990 and for ornamental plants since 1992, having attended and excelled in advanced training courses at the University of Maryland. Eric is the president of Complete Lawn Care and Complete Plant Health Care and Maintenance Incorporated, which was founded in 1991. Eric is a Montgomery County Master Gardener in the class of 1996. He's active with the Montgomery County Master Gardener Speakers Group, giving presentations to Master Gardeners like today, garden clubs, schools, and professional industry seminars. He often speaks about IPM, lawn care, plant care, pruning, soils, vegetable gardening, and landscape management. He's the guest instructor for Professor Stephen Dubik's Montgomery College Landscape Technology Program, and he's an instructor for Montgomery County's Continuing Education Program. Eric is the past president of the board of the DC branch of Professional Grounds Management Society, where he's been a member since 1997, and he is currently, excuse me, Secretary of the DC branch. Eric also serves on the Town of Laytonsville Tree Commission and chairs the Town of Laytonsville Planning Commission. So I want to give a warm welcome to Eric this morning.
Thank you, Linda, very much. Appreciate that. Thanks again to Linda for the introduction, and for everyone who's showed up for this February meeting. That's pretty good. I didn't know lawns were that popular in our group, but hey, that's excellent. We're going to talk about managing your lawn in Montgomery County, Maryland. Steve asked me to do an update on this. I've done this a few times. Many of you have seen it already. Some of the things, you know, they're old. You've seen them before, but I just want to point out that this is about education. It's not about being static. It's about being dynamic and about understanding and about not just accepting what's being said by me or anybody else, but about the research. And I'm going to try to help out with that by detailing this research that's ongoing. You know, it doesn't stop. And if I can, there we go. So we got to go through these standard slides, of course, for every Master Gardener talk, which is great. You all are very familiar with these. And then what we have is what have we learned in the last 4 years, really, since the Montgomery County pesticide ban went into effect. And, you know, not much in the sense that nothing has changed. It's still, I still consider it, as do millions of people and lots of research universities and all sorts of other things, still consider it turfgrass science. And that hasn't changed. The fundamentals still apply. And so we want to focus on those things whenever we're talking about lawn care or anything else that we do like this. I like to point out that one of the issues that we face is that we are in the Mid-Atlantic transition zone, and that's special. It's different to try to grow certain species of plants here, in turfgrass especially. We're in that, you know, north-south divide. And so what does that mean? It means that we can have warm, cold, dry, wet springs. And we can have hot, cool, dry, wet, humid summers. And we can have warm, dry, cool, wet falls extending into late November. And then, of course, we can have cold, warm, dry, wet winters. So, you know, that's meant to be a little humorous, but it's also meant to point out the fact that it's difficult here. It's not, we don't have set seasons. They extend. They are often, we'll get a warmer spring and then a colder late spring. Oftentimes we'll have a really warm fall that goes, you know, well into November, and then we'll just have starkly cold temperatures. It's hard on plants. And that includes turfgrass, and it changes how we manage them a little bit. So this is about Montgomery County, Maryland, and what we call organic lawn care, or what the county calls organic lawn care. I've got a lot of links in here. They're live links in the sense that they are accurate. I tested them all. If you want to learn more about the county's organic lawn care and the pesticide ban, it's there. They have a ton of detail. Of course, Montgomery County does things quite well in this department. They add a lot of information. And so what does this mean to us? So, you know, what's banned? Well, it's almost any registered product with a US EPA registration number, and that means pesticides. Now, it's not all, but it's almost all. And then there are a lot of products that don't have an EPA registration number. They might be in an alternate program called 25B. And because those are considered extremely low risk, they are allowed. And the purpose of the law is described to benefit the public health. That's generally what it's based on. And the knowledge that pesticides can be dangerous and that they can harm people and the environment. They do have a thing about signage regulations, but that's not a county regulation. That's a state regulation. And that is a little bit where we get some of the conflict and confusion about what's going on lawns in Montgomery County. But again, that's a state regulation by the Maryland Department of Agriculture. And then, of course, there are the exemptions to the law. So it isn't just a standard law that goes across the board. It applies to lawns that are being taken care of, both commercial and residential. And that's primarily what it applies to. The exemptions, the things where you can still use standard pesticides without any worry, is agriculture, where your food comes from, aquatics, so aquatic uses, not controlled, biting and stinging insects, so you can still spray pesticides for mosquitoes. Golf courses are still allowed to do their standard regimen. Of course, certain invasive plants are exempt, and so you can still use standard pesticides for that. Landscapes, so where you plant your trees and shrubs, those are all exempt. Public schools have their own IPM regulations that they follow. Sports fields, where your kids and we play sports. And the town of Laytonsville, coincidentally where I live, has not opted into the ban. It's the last municipality in the county that has not opted into the ban. So what is organic lawn care? And I say that because it's really what we're talking about in some ways. We're talking about the county, and they've instituted this organic lawn care. But what is it? And I can speak to it to some degree because I've been introduced to it and interested in it since the mid-1990s. So it's been a little while. And I actually thought that I was going to be way ahead of the game, and I was going to create an organic lawn care program, and I was going to be the leader of that pack. But what it turned out was that, there was really not a ton of material out there, products that you could purchase that are truly organic and that are also usable and effective. And that matters if you're trying to provide organic lawn care. And then, despite a lot of people's interest in organic lawn care, it's pretty widely misunderstood. And so while demand is there, once people recognize that you couldn't take care of certain issues, they opted for standard lawn care. So that's sort of how that evolved. And we're still there, despite the county's regulations. People still are a little bit dismayed. I heard one person before the meeting started said, they're just depressed about all of this, and they're just giving up on their lawn, and that I make them depressed. Well, I have two things to say to that. Don't be depressed. It's just lawns. Don't worry about that. If you care about your lawn, you can still find ways to manage it. And we're going to talk about that. And if you don't be depressed about it. It's just grass after all. And then, of course, the other aspect of this is, and I hear this a lot, is that, well, I just won't do anything. I've given up, right? But the University of Maryland research and lots of other research shows that that's not necessarily the best environmental way to go, because if you just ignore your lawn and you don't do something else with it, it often just reverts to a lot of weeds that are often not perennial. Some are, but a lot of them are annual. They die off. The lawn actually gets worse and worse, and that can lead to runoff. And that's a big part of why our streams get polluted, is because of erosion and runoff. That's where a lot of that comes from. Most of it, in fact, from different sources. I have a whole lot of slides here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on all of them. I'll blow through some of them. Some I'll spend more time on. A lot of this stuff I just copied and pasted right out of the county's website. This is information from the 2023. I'm sure they'll be updating it later this year. But this is basically a bunch of lists of what the county allows to use. And it's interesting because when you look at this, it looks like there's a lot of things, a lot of products. Wow. But if you really look into what these things are, a lot of them are just the same thing. They're just different brands. Vinegar is vinegar. Fatty soaps of fatty acids that are herbicidal are just that, and just different brands. They're just the same thing. So if you were to really just hone this down to just what's actually different, you'd only have about 3 different things here. These are just a bunch of different brands. And I did highlight in yellow, there are some misspellings on their website. That's not my misspelling. I didn't correct it, but I did highlight it because I like pointing things like that out. Makes me look wonderful, right? But anyway, there are some issues with some of the grammar and stuff. But anyway, these next slides, these are just herbicides. Again, they're either non-selective, meaning they kill everything. So if you spray it on, a dandelion, if that's your goal, you're going to kill the grass around it too. But ultimately, that's not probably what most people want to do. And so they might use some of these other products. And most of these are just iron-based. They're just iron, even though there's a bunch of different names. They're all just chelated iron. And we'll talk about that a little bit later about what chelated iron is. There are some other things out there. There are cinnamon oils and soybean oils and eugenols. And all of these things have varying degrees of efficacy, how well they work. But ultimately, they don't work very well. And that's again, part of the issue that I found back in the 90s and is still the case today. Insecticides, there are a bunch of things. And by a bunch of things, I mean there's azadirachtin. So anything you see, Azagard, Azamax, that's all azadirachtin. There are things like diatomaceous earth. And there are, some of the BTs out there. And most of them are not that great, don't work that well. They work a little bit. The new grub gone, beetle gone product that's out there, which is Bacillus thuringiensis G. Galleria, that does work pretty well. It's pretty expensive. It's far superior to the old milky spore, which didn't really work. And that is one of the products that does sort of work. Whether or not you want to try to get it on your lawn to stop grubs, these things take time, and you may actually lose your lawn while you're actually eradicating the beetle grubs. So there are some issues there. A lot of times folks see a grub, they dig around their yard and they say, oh, I got grubs, and they think they have to do something. It's important to recognize that grubs really only become a problem when there is a number of them per square foot, depending on the species, anywhere from 8 to 12 per square foot in your turf, that could cause damage. But just digging in the ground and finding a grub, it's not a grub problem, and you really don't need to be treating for that. And that is important to know. Fungicides. Again, there are some of them out here. It's actually amazing what they've done with fungicides. But in my opinion, and I would like you to adopt my opinion, is that if you're treating your lawn with a fungicide, you're just wasting your time and money. It's not worth the effort. The results you get are limited at best. It's different for ornamental plants and for organic gardening, for your vegetables. That's different. But for your lawn, typically your lawn's not going to be wiped out by a disease or a fungus. It's going to recover once the weather changes. And so don't waste your time and money on these things. The results you get are limited. The costs are high, and there just isn't a good return on investment. And it's not really worth your time. I do want to say before I go any further too, because we didn't discuss this, we usually do. If you have questions, we'll try to take them at the end if we have time, or you can email them or whatever, and we'll try to address them. This is mole and vole repellents. I know we have moles. They're out there. They come and go. Most folks relate grubs and moles. They say, oh, I have moles in my yard. I must have grubs. And that's not really the case. While moles will eat grubs, they primarily feed on earthworms, worms. So, and other insects and stuff, but mostly worms. So if your lawn is moist, it's wet, and there are lots of worms, which you want, well, so do the moles. And indeed, moles would be considered beneficial. They aren't really harming anything, but that tunneling, of course, does cause safety issues. You could, trip and break your leg. You could. And of course, it does tend to kill the roots underneath as they get exposed to air. So that becomes the issue. A lot of these things are just based on castor oil or other essential oils. They're sold under all different names. And I have yet to see any scientific research that's peer-reviewed that says these things work. They claim it works, and they have their research, the people who are selling it, but I haven't seen any actual research. I'm always looking for that and interested in that. And you should be too, because you're master gardeners. So again, this is taken off the Montgomery County website. They're talking about how to manage your lawn organically. They're giving you information on how to do it, as am I right now. I think the big issue here is that the county says, don't worry about your pH. It doesn't matter. And then they say, well, if it's kind of low below 5.6 or kind of high above 7.6, you might want to do something. And then they make suggestions about adding pine needle mulches or wood ash. And I'm just going to say, again, from a scientific basis, from turfgrass science, soil science, I have a hard time accepting this part of the county's recommendation that pH doesn't matter, and that their recommendations aren't really based scientifically, in the sense that if you have a pH of a certain setting, okay, say it's 5.7, it also matters, what type of soil it is, and it matters what the, cation exchange capacity is and what the buffer pH is. And so all of those kind of work together, and you can't really change the pH one way or the other unless you know exactly what those things are. Because just adding some pine needles or some wood ash, how much? What rate? And how do you do that? How do you get that rate? So I think it's missing a lot of important scientific turfgrass science information in managing pH. And just to show you, you can find this chart all over the place. There's all different examples of it. But this is, basically the pH scale and how nutrients, major nutrients, and micronutrients are available to plants at what pH. And so when you say pH doesn't really matter, and then you see this chart and you recognize that this chart is based on plant availability, and so red is not available, plant can't get it. Yellow is somewhat available, and then green is plant available, and it fluctuates widely with this pH scale. And so I find it little bit off base to say pH doesn't matter. I'm just basing this on science, mind you. We talk about calcium and magnesium. That's oftentimes how we manage pH, and those are big macronutrients out there. Not surprising to me, but perhaps to most folks, calcium is high in a lot of our soils here in Montgomery County and in Frederick County, naturally high in a lot of places. We have quarries. The Travilla Quarry over in West Rockville there. And of course, we have big Genstar Quarry up in Frederick. Those quarries are mining basically calcitic rock, so gravel and things of that nature. Those are high pH, and they're indicative of the soils that surround it. And so a lot of that is out there. And of course, a lot of the old beliefs are, oh, you should lime your lawn every year. You see the farmers doing it or whatever. And so lime is real important, but you can't know that unless you have a soil test that tells you the pH and the buffer pH. And ultimately, of course, the county is saying it doesn't matter. I believe it does. And I also believe that people do put lime down far too often than the soil requires. And that a lot of people are using dolomitic lime, and that means it has magnesium in it. And having excessive magnesium and calcium is not helpful to your lawn or to plants. And I do a lot of soil testing. I see a lot of soil tests, and you would be surprised, but I'm not, at how many of these soil test results show really high calcium levels and pH levels and excessive magnesium levels. Again, the county says that lime isn't particularly important, or gypsum. In fact, they recommend not to use it. They specifically state don't use it because they are mined products, and they feel that's an environmental aspect that they won't want to approve of. But this is the biggest thing that's used in turf and in agricultural farming. They're just the biggest things that are used, lime and gypsum. So it's interesting that the county thinks that they might actually harm the soil, yet most farming involves limestone applications, and so does lawn care, but again, based on soil tests. And so we have actual scientific data that shows liming is actually beneficial when it's done properly, and it does not destroy the soil or the microorganisms that live there. These are some recommendations off the county's website. that they give your tips, and these are really great tips. They make sense. Mowing high, we've been recommending that for decades. In this area, the Mid-Atlantic, mowing high during the hot months, and we say here between April 15th and October 15th really helps lawns overall. And it does help to outcompete weeds, but also overseeding on a regular basis to keep your lawn dense can help a lot. But you'll notice the county recommends compost and organic matter, and you'll see this goes on quite a bit. But ultimately, I'm going to show you why that might be a little bit of a conflict here. So only water during dry spells makes perfect sense. You shouldn't be overwatering your lawn. If you're concerned about water use and your turf and you don't think it is environmentally sound, I agree with you. You don't need to water your lawn typically. Sometimes you might, but not as often as most people think. And then, of course, the county says stop adding weed and feed chemicals. Well, they're saying stop adding them, but they've banned them, so it's illegal to do that. So you should stop it because it's against the county pesticide ban. And then it says hand pull weeds, which you may try to do, but you may find that pretty challenging if you have a large patch of weeds. And of course, they say leave the clover, and that's fine. And then patch bare areas after you've pulled the weeds, patch it with compost and grass seed. It talks about phosphorus here. I don't want to spend a ton of time, but again, it talks about putting down wood ashes and blackstrap molasses. Some of these things, you know, okay, fine. That's okay. But how much blackstrap molasses? Where do you buy yours? I mean, do you need to buy it in a 50-gallon drum? What's the rate? And then again, wood ash tea. How do you manufacture that? Where do you get your wood ash from? And how do you come up with a proper application? They don't address any of that, but I want to bring that to your attention that that's harder to do than it sounds. Not impossible, but harder to do than it sounds. Maybe not on a garden or in a bed, but across a lawn, it becomes much more complicated in getting a good application. Again, the county here, they talk about phosphorus, talking about well-aged compost. I'm going to get to this in a moment, but again, the county recommends compost a lot. And compost, according to the state of Maryland, who regulates fertilizers, the county doesn't regulate fertilizer, the state does. And that's what a lot of this talk is about, actually, is it's regulated. Phosphorus is a regulated nutrient. Compost contains phosphorus for the most part, and so therefore it is regulated. And you can't simply apply it and be within the law with the state of Maryland. You could be in violation by making those applications. And then it talks about adding organic matter and not to worry about it. Yeah, you're not going to worry about organic matter necessarily. You want it added in. It builds up over time. If you add compost or other things that can break down, like your lawn care clippings, when you mow your lawn, you should be leaving them. That adds nutrient, it adds moisture, and it adds organic matter. And while it's not much in a single mowing over time, it's significant. And this is where we get to the state. This is a state thing right here. Be wise, don't over fertilize, and help protect Chesapeake Bay. I think we're all on base with this. I support this wholeheartedly. This is Maryland's lawn fertilizer law. If you're not familiar with it, you should be. It's been around for quite a while. Its current iteration, 2013, but it dates back even further than that. And this was designed to help people understand, and that includes farmers, and it includes professional lawn care applicators, and it also included homeowners for the first time in 2013, that what you do matters and how you do it matters. And so we can help protect the environment with proper application and understanding what that means. That's Maryland's fertilizer law. The county takes a lot of this information, they link to it, and that's good, but their recommendations oftentimes contradict this. So again, this law also applies to homeowners. It has been quite a long time now. Don't know how many people comply with it. I think most lawn care professionals do. By law, Maryland, if you're a professional lawn care applicator, you have to be registered and licensed by the state, and you have to take continuing education every year and renew every year. So you've got to do all that. So we're always practicing that. These are the two primary grasses that most people might be familiar with: tall fescue and bluegrass. Certainly, fine fescue plays a pretty big role in this area, as zoysia grass does as a warm season grass, probably the most popular warm season grass in our area. Whether it's a cool season grass like tall fescue or bluegrass, or fine fescue or zoysia grass or warm season grass, these things all have different needs and at different times for nutrients, and that's why we fertilize. And then there are things that are more progressive, like no-mow lawns. I don't know that they've ever become super popular. They certainly get talked about here and there. I certainly was asked to put some in. Most of the time, what happens is people are excited about it when it happens. It's a little hard to maintain, and it gets a little rough looking over time. By the second year, going into the third year, it's not great. And even the guy, Wild Ones, who sort of promoted this whole idea of no-mow lawns, he even says, it's a problem. You can't walk on them. You don't really use them. They're just there. And then they need to be maintained, because if you just leave them alone, you're going to get invasive weeds like Canadian thistle and trees and things like that. So it's not really a panacea. And indeed, the couple no-mow lawns that I installed, we were asked to basically get rid of after just a couple years, because they were pretty unsightly. And then we talk about what is good. At least I do, because I want to point out that, everybody has their opinion and they're entitled to that. And it doesn't mean you're right or wrong. It just means that's what you like or you want to believe. You should try to use science and accurate information to make your opinion, but no one has to force you to do that. But again, like to some people, ice cream is good, and other people might like fresh baked bread. But if you're lactose intolerant, or you suffer from celiac disease, which is a gluten allergy, those things are bad. They're not going to make you happy. So you have to look at it the same way when it comes to lawns. What you like might be different than what somebody else likes, but the important thing here is there's no perfection, there's no perfect, there's just good. What's good? Try to go for the good. That's what we want to do. In my opinion, a 90% turf coverage is good. You might not care one bit, and that's fine too. But what we find is that when you're maintaining lawns, it isn't the insect and disease problems that create the issue. It's really weeds. It's plants that you don't want in your lawn. They are the biggest and most common problem, and the most difficult and challenging problem. So the county has what they call their organic lawn care law. And so who certifies organic lawn care? Well, there are some places that do. You've got the Northeast Organic Farming Association. You can get certified with them. I think there's a fee associated with that. There's the Organic Landscape Association Advisors. This is an interesting group, because most of the people in this advisory group that can certify organic things, they all are sort of owners or primaries in companies that sell organic products or services. So that's cool. And then, of course, there's OMRI. Most people are familiar with the Organic Materials Research Institute. That's the big one. There's Oregon Tilth, which is a big one. And then whenever you see this sign for organic gardening, that means you've got an organic product, or you're at Giant Food, because I think their logo looks exactly the same. So we heard this earlier, Linda Barrett, Baywise. You can also get certified by creating an organic lawn and landscape, and you can get certified through the Master Gardeners and University of Maryland Extension. So that's cool. But as I say, is it really organic? And I think that's my point here. Fiesta herbicide, which when we were looking at that list of approved herbicides from the county, more than half of them were chelated iron. The biggest brand name that's known is Fiesta. I use a lot of Fiesta in Montgomery County. It's basically chelated iron. It is not organic, and it does have an EPA registration number. It's approved by the county, but it's really technically not even natural. It's chelated iron. It's got to be synthesized in a laboratory. So I think if you're using Fiesta in your organic lawn, I'm not sure your lawn's organic. Now, on the other hand, a product called Final Sand, which is basically an ammoniated fat, soap of fatty acid, which again, most of those approved substances on the county's list fall in that category. That is actually organic. Now, that's non-selective though. So what you spray that on, it's going to turn brown. It isn't systemic, so it doesn't kill the roots. If you have a well-established lawn or weed, it's going to grow back, but it's going to look really brown for a while. But that is actually organic. And then we look at things like Blue Plains Water Treatment Plant. And why do I bring that up? Is it organic? Almost all major metropolitan areas have sewer systems that collect and treat. They're called sanitary sewer, right? They want to collect the wastewater, the effluent that comes from our toilets, and they want to treat that, and they want to put that back into the rivers and tributaries so that it's clean and not contributing to the pollution that is so rampant in all of our tributaries and the Chesapeake Bay. So the question is this organic? And the reason is all these sewer systems, they take out a lot of solid products. I mean, probably billions of tons across the country. And so what do they do with it all? I mean, you've got to do something. And most of them are turning it into a fertilizer, a biosolid, or a top dressing compost product. And they're selling it, and you can buy it. DC's is called Bloom. And, they're trying to market that very heavily. They have a lot of it. Is it organic? Yeah, technically it's organic. But would you want to use that on your vegetable garden? I don't know. I wouldn't, but that's just my opinion. But a lot of the organic fertilizers that you see on the market, if you read the ingredients, they are actually coming from biosolids, which are basically a nice name for treated sewer sludge. So that's cool. And then IPM, Integrated Pest Management. As master gardeners, we talk about that a lot. I do, certainly. It's more than just, 3 words. It's a whole process. It involves a whole lot. At least it does to me. I'm a big believer in IPM, Integrated Pest Management. But part of Integrated Pest Management is having all these things, this toolbox. It's a thought process, but it's also a toolbox of tools that you can use. And the county's law kind of limits what you can do under IPM. It restricts a lot of things that are in that toolbox. It gets rid of them. So how do you do it? Well, cultural. You start with how you are doing things. If you're doing things properly, culturally, if you're not correcting those things, mowing properly, watering properly, using the correct type of grass seed or plant, that's cultural. Mechanical, you can do a lot with mechanical, removing things, pruning things, very effective. Biological, there are a lot of biological things we can use these days, from ladybugs to green lacewing nymphs, predatory mites, and a lot of other fungal and virus-based things. But the IPM toolbox also includes chemical, and that includes natural, organic, synthetic herbicides, insecticides, and fungicides. That's what a full toolbox would look like. And we don't have that in Montgomery County. So pesticide use. Are organic pesticides dangerous? Because if the county says we're going to do this because it's less harmful, fine, but are they dangerous? I don't want you to consider that, oh, it's organic, or your family to consider it's organic, so therefore it's okay. It's still, if it's a pesticide, it's still a pesticide. So if it has side, C-I-D-E, as the suffix, that means it's a pesticide and you need to handle it with care. Herbicides are pesticides. The term isn't pesticides and herbicides. Herbicides are pesticides. So you need to follow your label instructions. You need to wear your personal protective wear. You need to, know what kind of formulation and how you mix it. And you need to observe the signal word, which tells you how dangerous it actually might be to you immediately and sometimes even long term. So caution, that's not too bad. That's a warning that says, hey, wear eye protection or something. Warning is telling you this is a little bit more dangerous. And then there's danger. I mean, that can't get more explicit than that, danger. And I point this out because a lot of the organic products have a danger label. And you might not realize that, but when you work with some of the citric acid derivatives and the agricultural vinegars, these are very dangerous products, and they can blind you. And that's why they have a danger label. And then, of course, there's poison, and we don't see a lot of that, almost none. Almost anything that has a poison label with a skull and crossbone, that's going to be a restricted use product. You're not going to see a lot of that anywhere. So why do we even care? How much turf grass? Well, a lot. There's a lot in Maryland. There's a lot in the Chesapeake Bay's watershed. It's growing all the time. Montgomery County has way over 300,000 total acres, and more than 140,000 of those acres are turf grass. So more than 44%. And the thing is that it's growing. I know we're master gardeners. We talk about lawn alternatives, and it's a growing trend. But in the meantime, lawns are the fastest growing type of landscape out there. And they continue to grow and will for a while. So it isn't simply a question of, well, we're working away from that, so we shouldn't worry about it. And there's a lot of turf grass that's being managed, and we want it to be managed properly for sure. And this is a big reason why the Chesapeake Bay watershed, this is what we talk about a lot in our region. There are other watersheds in other regions. But the interesting thing is that the Chesapeake Bay watershed is 64,000 square miles. It's huge. It goes all the way to New York. And so it's a large, large watershed. And this all meaning it drains into the Chesapeake Bay. So it's taking a lot. And when you see this picture here, what you see is that, you've got green and you've got yellow and red that really stand out. And basically what it says is that pollution is worse where it's red and yellow. And most of those things are where people are. So where the cities are, that's where the runoff is, where suburbia is, where urban sprawl is taking place. And so where does all this nutrient pollution come from that goes into the bay? Well, the atmosphere is over 70% nitrogen. And so there's just a lot of natural atmospheric nitrogen that drops out and ends up going into our waterways. So 0.7 million pounds, septic. So that's where you aren't connected to a sanitary sewer, but you're actually, your toilet goes into a tank and then it goes into the ground and is filtered by the ground. And we get about 4 million pounds a year from septic. Then there's all other urban and suburban runoff, all the stuff that happens on our roads and our lawns and sports fields and everything else. About 5.6 million pounds of runoff. That's man-made for sure. Then there's forest runoff. And so we love our forests and our trees, but they actually contribute about 7.1 million pounds of organic nutrient pollution to our environment. Then there's wastewater, which, you're talking Blue Plains and other treatment plants, 14.2 million pounds. That's huge, enormous. And then agriculture, which is the biggest contributor at 17.8 million pounds. I love agriculture. We need agriculture. I support agriculture, but the facts are the facts. And the Chesapeake Bay's #1 contributor is the Susquehanna River, which feeds directly into the top of the bay. And that's where most of the nutrient pollution comes from. Interestingly, the Bay had a pretty decent report card for 2023, and the hypoxia levels were at an all-time low, really, in modern time. And hypoxia means a lack of oxygen. So when you get these dead zones. And interestingly, 2023 had pretty low numbers, some of the lowest, again, we've seen in modern times. And the question is, why would that be? Why did the Bay get better? And if you remember, 2023 was a dry year from start to finish, a dry winter, a dry spring, a dry summer, and a dry fall. We didn't really start changing that until about December. We started getting some good rain. And so when we have a dry year, there's less runoff going into the Chesapeake Bay, and the Chesapeake Bay gets better. So that's an important factor. If we get a wet year, that will change in the opposite direction. This is the major sources of nitrogen and phosphorus. It's coming from sewage treatment plants and animal feedlots and runoff from cropland. Of course, urban and suburban contribute, as we saw. But you know, it's a lot of it is being done outside of our direct control. And no doubt that the largest source of pollution from the bay is agricultural runoff. When we talk about trading out lawns to protect the bay, this is a slide I like to use. Dr. Mike Goatley from Virginia Tech let me use this slide. He took this picture. He's on the campus. They had a huge rainstorm. He looked out and he saw this, which is a landscape bed with what looks like a large juniper shrub. And there's just huge amount of runoff of soil and sediment, and it's going directly into a drain that goes into eventually a tributary or stream. But where you see the turf, there is no runoff right there. And that stands in line with all of the scientific testing that's been done, that turf is an excellent buffer, and that when you put things on turf, it doesn't just run off. And we're talking, of course, actively growing turf, not frozen turf. But it's important to understand that turf is an excellent buffer, and it can outperform landscape beds when it comes to runoff, especially when there's heavy rainfall or irrigation. And this is a little experiment that just sort of backs that up. You can do it. I think it's a fun experiment. You get some nice, like 5-gallon water jugs, and you cut them out like this. You lay them down. You can get some, little plastic bottles that are everywhere because we have too many of them in our environment. And you can put soil in there, and you can put seed in it and grow it. And then you can have mulch, and then you can have just bare soil. You can pour water through this. You can catch the effluent that runs out, and you can see very simply a good example of this. We know that good turf actually does a great job filtering pollutants. And so we're talking water quality there. And that's a big part, I think, of the organic lawn care push, is we're trying to have a safer environment, better quality, of our environment. And I think a good lawn can play into that if it's managed properly. I've got a bunch of research in here that we're not going to get too deeply into, but there's a lot of research here, and you can look at it yourself. And so, does runoff from properly managed lawns significantly contribute to water pollution? And the answer is not, according to the scientific data. So again, proper, and that's an important word. This is a white paper. This is applied research. It's Scott's company, and you can question if you want, but you'll see there's a lot of PhDs here from universities that are ag universities, and they put their names on this. And I think that's important because I don't think they're going to put their names on stuff that isn't accurate. So these are our nutrient management laws. They started in 1972 with the Federal Clean Water Act. And then 98, Maryland introduced its first Water Quality Improvement Act, and that was the first nutrient management law in Maryland. And then we had the Chesapeake Bay Phosphorus Reduction Act, then the Maryland Fertilizer Use Act, and again in 2013, for the first time, it included homeowners. We got links to all that in here. I'm going to go past a lot of this stuff. A lot of it's common sense, you already know, but don't apply fertilizers to impervious surfaces like roads and sidewalks. And why would you? What good could you get from that? None at all. So stop wasting that. Hope you're not doing that. There are rules about how much fertilizer you can put down on turf grass and when you can put it down. It's important to understand that it only makes sense to fertilize actively growing turf. So you shouldn't be putting it down if it's drought stressed, and you shouldn't be putting it down if it's frozen or if it's wintertime and it's dormant. So that makes sense. And I have this little comic here. I like it. There's the topsoil and the bottom soil, right? So, topsoil is basically unregulated, and there's no real definition of it. You can buy a bag of topsoil, and technically speaking, you have no idea what's in it, but it's topsoil. But bottom soil, what comes out the back end or out of blue plains, that's manure, but that's also turns into compost, and that's got nutrient in it. It's fertilizer, and the state of Maryland says it's fertilizer, and so that's regulated. So it's important to understand. Now, it's not regulated for your gardens or your landscape beds, but it is when it comes to your lawn. And so you might just ask, why do we even bother fertilizing turf? Let's just stop. But again, research at the University of Maryland and other universities show that just ignoring turf doesn't actually improve the environment, letting it get thin and weedy. It actually improves a lot just by fertilizing it. And there's a lot of different fertilizers out there, and some of them are organic, some of them are not. They're synthetic, some are, interesting enough, synthetic organic. How do you know how much fertilizer to put on your lawn? Well, the University of Maryland has lots of research here. This is what we recommend. We recommend to follow the University of Maryland rules. Now, the county does not recommend that, but I do, and I think you should. And as master gardeners, I think you should support that. That's not a regulation that the county makes. It's just a recommendation that you not follow this. But it talks about how much fertilizer you need to put down for the species of grass that you're growing and for the year, and whether it's a new stand the first 1 or 2 years, or whether it's an older stand, 3 years or older, because typically speaking, when you have an established lawn, it doesn't need as much fertilizer. And this matters. It matters for the type of turf, cool season, and the species of cool season, and then warm season grasses, which require, for the most part, a lot less. Zoysia just doesn't need that much fertilizer. Now, Bermuda grass, that's a bit of a hog, and it likes it. You don't see that in lawns a whole lot, except as a sort of common Bermuda grass that's a weed. But in sports turf, Bermuda grass is very, very popular, and it's used at a lot of schools and at a lot of sports fields and a lot of professional sports fields. And that requires a whole lot of fertilizer, between sort of May, June, and September. Yeah, Bermuda grass really likes that. So why should we soil test? The county doesn't think that it's that important, but I think it is. And it's because things aren't always what they seem. You can't just look at your lawn and say, oh, I have moss, I need lime. You're making a big mistake. And the big mistake is that you're assuming that just because there's moss growing somewhere, that the pH must be low. And that's a common belief. But moss is a simple plant. It doesn't require the sun's light to grow, like complex plants, like grass plants or bushes and trees. So if you have moss growing somewhere, it's simply showing you that the other plants can't necessarily compete there. Is it because of the pH? That's unlikely, because moss doesn't necessarily care about the pH. It will grow in a low pH or a high pH. More importantly to moss is whether it's moist and it's shady. It likes those conditions, and so you're going to get a good moss stand there, whether you have a high pH or a low pH. So just because you have lime or moss doesn't mean you need lime. The fact is that if you do put lime directly on the moss, you will probably hurt it pretty badly. Not unlike if you change the pH in your fish tank drastically, you're going to see your fish floating. But eventually the moss is going to recover and it's going to grow back there if there's nothing else competing. These are the essential nutrients that your plants need to grow, and grass plants included. I got this from Ken Ingram from the University of Maryland Institute of Applied Agriculture. This is showing you what's important to the plants, but you got to look at those top three: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. Those are the big ones. They're 83% of plant weight, and they just occur naturally. They're not added, right? You're not adding carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So the other 17%, those are the plant nutrients that we add to try to improve our plants, whether it's turf or otherwise. But a lot of them already exist. And then there are things like minerals. And, can you really make a big difference by adding minerals to your lawn? In most cases, you require so much by weight that it's impractical, both financially and to make that application. Very hard to put enough green sand down on 1,000 square feet, let alone 10,000 square feet. And nor should you even worry about it. You want to do it in your potting mix or in your vegetable garden, it might make a lot more sense. These are those essential minerals. We can add a lot of these things, but we don't need to, depending on the conditions of your lawn. And then there are things like this. Again, I took this from Ken Ingram. He let me use this. He's very gracious. I love this because this is an all-natural azomite, trace minerals. And when you look at the box, it tells you what's in it. It's a 000.2, which means that 0.2% of that 1 pound box is actually what you're buying to use what you think you're using it for, which comes out to be 0.032 ounces. And as Ken said, you actually probably get more use out of composting the box than what's in the box. So just because it's natural or this or that, you need to think about why you're using it and what it's actually contributing. And I'll agree with the county in a case like this, in which you say, well, where did that come from? How was it mined? How did it get in the box? And how did it get on your store shelf? There's a lot going into that. And if you think it's natural and organic, what's the pipeline for getting that to your lawn? So question that. Lots of different fertilizers, lots of fertilizer terminology, natural organics, so derived from plants, living organisms, waste of living organisms, or animals. Synthetic organics, they're man-made, but they're carbon and hydrogen, so they're organic, not in the natural sense, but in the chemical sense. Inorganics, synthesized products, and then, of course, your minerals. So again, I'm pointing this out because it's a big part of my talk here is what is natural and what is organic. And the fact is that all this stuff exists naturally, but the real issue is that it doesn't, these nutrients don't necessarily exist in the quantities we need them, where we need them, and when we need them. So that's why we put fertilizers down. That's why fertilizers are manufactured. And so does the source matter? Sure, it matters. You know, are you getting it a biosolid from a water treatment plant, or are you getting it from, you know, composted plant material, or is it composted animals? And bone meal, you know, you're essentially using ground up animal bones. I'm not sure if that's a great idea. And of course, urea is a synthetic organic, and most organic systems don't like urea. They like things like this. And there's a lot of organic nutrient products out there. There's compost and compost teas. Again, the county likes compost tea a lot, but it is, again, University of Maryland states that compost teas can contribute to nutrient runoff. So you have to be careful how you apply them. And the other research is that basically, while it may not do any harm, there's no evidence scientifically that your compost teas actually do a whole lot to change the health of your plants. This is a situation we see a lot, top dressing. The county recommends this a lot, but the question is this a legal operation in Maryland? Not just Montgomery County, but in Maryland. And the answer is it depends. If you're applying too much compost to your lawn, you're violating the county or the state regulation. And then again, I took this off the county's website. They're talking about aerating. The only thing is that's a dethatcher. It's not an aerator. It's a dethatcher. So just, you know, little things. That's a core aerator. I think that's what they were referring to. And again, you can kind of see this illustration about how a core aerator sort of pulls plugs to help get nutrients and roots down into the soil. The only thing about this is that if you have a dense clay loam soil and you core aerate it and you don't top dress it with something else to fill those holes, not very long afterwards, it reverts back to what it was. A lot of research on that. If you top dress it, you can actually start improving it. And the other thing about core aeration is it pulls a core to the surface. And typically those are just sort of a seed bank for weeds that you're putting on the surface. And then a lot of times you're spreading invasive species like Bermuda grass or Poa trivialis. So adding compost, again, it's against Maryland nutrient management law to apply too much compost to your lawn. And again, the county refers to adding compost a lot. And I think they should have more information linking to how you can do that legally. You got to be careful with your lawn. Again, it doesn't apply to your gardens. That's the same for organic fertilizers. Just because it's organic doesn't mean it's okay to use The county doesn't regulate that, the state does. Lots of products out there. The state bans the use of phosphorus unless you have a soil test indicating the need or you're establishing bare soil. Otherwise, you're not allowed to use it. There are a lot of organic products out there now that have removed the phosphorus. So you see that middle number, the 10, 0, that's the P. That is a legal product to use in Maryland and Montgomery County. Grass seed is a big issue. Just because it's got a pretty bag doesn't mean it's a good grass seed. You're not buying the bag. So you got to read the label. That's the law. The state of Maryland, again, does this. They require this label. If you go to the store just for the heck of it, and you'll start seeing grass seed on the shelves soon, start looking at those labels. You'll see this is a really good label. This is what you kind of want to see for a tall fescue blend. You've got 0 other crop, you got 0 weed seed, and just 1.26% inert matter. That's what you're looking for. I'd be interested to get your feedback on what you read when you see the seed labels on the stuff on the shelves at the store. This is how you can evaluate whether or not you're getting a good grass variety. And that's the National Turf Grass Evaluation Program. This is part of USDA, and they do the research all over the country, including nearby here in Beltsville, where they are actually testing these turf grasses to see how they do. So why do we have a need for pesticides? Because we have pests, right? And the county has banned the use of most pesticides because they're concerned about the environment and health of people and animals. I agree with that. But the recommendations that I would recommend to you for controlling pests is don't overreact. I mean, do you really have a problem that needs to be treated? You can stem the use of most pesticides just by taking this first step. Just because you see something happening doesn't mean you have to do something about it. And if you do something, it doesn't mean you have to just reach for the nearest thing that might not be either helpful or might actually be harmful. Most insects can be tolerated in your lawn. Again, if you find grubs, it doesn't mean you have a grub problem. Weeds are the bigger issue. They can kind of take over a lawn, and they are the biggest challenge in Montgomery County. There's lots of different bugs out there, and there are some treatments. Bavaria bassiani, that's a fungus that naturally occurs, but you can also buy, and it will affect, insects and grubs, larval. But it's slow, and it's a little hard to get it to happen when you want it. This new BT Galleria, that actually does work pretty well. It's a better BT. Don't buy Milky Spore. If you want to use a BT, this is the one to use. And it is the first BT that works both on the larva and the adults. So that's important. Things like chinch bugs. What you see here is an old turfgrass plot that used to be at the demo garden in Durwood, and it turned brown for no particular reason, and it turned out it was chinch bugs. And chinch bugs are hard to control, and they do kill your lawn. You can't really tolerate them. If you have a zoysia lawn and you get chinch bug damage, it's going to be years before it recovers. It's going to be very hard. You can't tolerate that a whole lot. That's a big-eyed bug that actually looks a little like a chinch bug, but it's a predator. It eats chinch bugs. And then when you see brown like this, you can't just assume it's chinch bug damage. This is just drought stress, but it looks very similar. So you need to go out and do some ID. A sod webworm. How do you know if you have sod webworms? Well, it's hard to see one of these caterpillars. They're usually out at night, but you might see these white moths floating up, and that might be your indicator. If there's hundreds of them floating up as you walk across your lawn, that you might end up with some sod webworms, because these are laying eggs. The moth doesn't eat anything. It doesn't damage your lawn, but it lays the eggs that become the caterpillar. But, treating for sod webworms, is that really a big deal? Because that's a big food for birds and other predators, like even big-eyed bugs. So a lot of times you don't need to worry about sod webworms damaging your lawn. Fall armyworms. I just put this in here because a few years ago, these things came up from the south, and they caused immense damage. In just a couple weeks, just wiped a lot of people's lawns out. But this is an unusual occurrence. We don't get a lot of that here. grubs. If you've got 24 grubs per square foot, as it shows in this slide, you've got a problem that you're probably going to have to do something about. And there are a lot of different species of beetles. And so there are a lot of different species of beetle grubs, and they come out at all different times of the year. And some of them are multi-generational, which means that those grubs are there for more than 1 year. This is what the adults look like. I'm showing you all this because I don't want you to overreact to these things. Most of these things are not a threat to you. This is a billbug larva. It's a weevil. Unlike beetle grub larva, it doesn't have any legs. It's legless. That's how you know it's a weevil larva. And again, this is typically a problem for golf courses and things like that. And there are also beneficial insects that live in your lawn, despite what some people believe. And again, I get a lot of calls about the ant mounds in people's lawns, usually in the late spring, April to May, and people want something done about these ants. And again, you could argue that ants are a beneficial insect. They do a lot of good. They're predators, but these aren't ant mounds. These are solitary bees. These are our native bees. These are things that live in the ground that come out early, and they are our earliest pollinators. And they're super important. And if they take a home in your lawn, you shouldn't be concerned about them damaging your lawn. They're not. They're there for a little while, and then they rest, and they're gone, and the lawn is fine. There's no need to be treating this. And indeed, I see these in a lot of lawns. And that tells me that the lawn can be a biodiverse place. Plants do have the ability to fight back. Endophytes are often introduced into plants to actually kill pests. This is just a simple thing. The plot in front, not endophyte enhanced. The top plot behind is. That's without applying any additional pesticide. You've got a actual endophytic fungi living within the plant that actually harms the pest. And this is a nematode. You can buy these. You can put them out. They're really hard to work with. I did some experimentation with the University of Maryland, Professor Lee Hellman back in the 80s. And we found that basically this is a hard thing to do. This might work better for things like dogwood or ash borer, lilac borer. But when it comes to controlling grubs with nematodes, it's a really hard thing to do. That's what a grub larva looks like. You can see those sort of white things there. That's a rear end of a beetle grub. And inside that is a bunch of nematodes that have basically killed that grub. It's brown patch disease. Please don't worry about brown patch disease. It's going to happen almost every summer, and the lawn's going to recover. It's out there. It's the most common disease we have in our area for turf. It just isn't going to kill your turf. Weeds are the bigger deal. You can try to manage them. You can pull them as the county suggests, or you might use dynamite as this guy is doing. I don't recommend that. So what's a weed? Depends on who you are. These days, that weed is legal. That's amazing. But why do we dislike weeds? We don't like to, disrupt our aesthetics and uniformity. It matters on sports turf more than home lawns. They do compete for nutrients and water with our desired crop. They might harbor insect pests, viruses, and diseases. So if you have a garden and you have certain weeds around out in your yard, you may be getting aphids, and those aphids may be picking up viruses from those weeds, and they may then transmit them to your tomatoes or your cucumbers or your squash. They can displace native plants or desired species. They can be allelopathic, meaning that they can actually put chemicals in the ground that prevent other things from growing there. They can harbor pathogens and insects, and they can cause problems, poison ivy, rashes, things like that. And there's playability issues. There's erosion issues. There's different things. That's why. But as my dear Pat Kenny says, eat your Wheaties. And I have to say, happy birthday, Pat Kenny. Happy birthday, Pat. She's the one who introduced me to eat your Wheaties. Most of these things are edible. Most of the weeds out there, as long as you're not treating them with anything, you might have a good salad. This is the oldest experiment ongoing. Basically, there is. This is the park grass experiment. Started at 1856, and it's still ongoing. That's amazing. Basically, what they have discovered is that if you have a high pH and potassium, you're going to have a lot of dandelions. And if you have no potassium, you really don't have any dandelions. That's all they're doing here. They're not doing anything else. They're just messing with lime and nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and calcium. And basically what they found is that, they could make the weeds like dandelions disappear simply by lowering the pH and having no potassium. Pretty neat. I'm going to blast through a lot of these things, but I do want to point out that mowing matters. We know that. If you mow high, you're going to have less weeds and a healthier turf. This is an old slide, but every one of those sticks is a crabgrass plant. And basically, the lower you mow, the more crabgrass you have. And fertility matters, fertilizing. These are test plots. You can see these, that basically the worst test plots weren't fertilized and were mowed short. Even high mowed plots that weren't fertilized didn't do as well as the mowed high fertilized. And urea is the best thing for turf grass ever. Mowing matters, sharp blade matters. Electric mowers are on the scene. Somebody did a study, Italian people. I don't know why the Italians did this study, but they wanted to calculate how well an electric mower could mow. And they did the research. I mean, this is real high-end research. They're taking some good photography. They're measuring leaf blade damage. And what we know is that as a electric mower runs, a battery power, it tends to lose energy as it goes on. The blades don't quite spin as fast, and it starts to do more damage. That's what we learned from this study. And then the fact that the blades, they try to make them lighter so that they can spin faster. But because they're lighter, they tend to wear more, and so they dull out faster. So that's interesting. I want to point out that Japanese stiltgrass, which is one of our biggest invasive species here, is not managed by mowing height. So while that crabgrass slide, the lower you mow, the more crabgrass, Japanese stiltgrass does not care how high you mow it. It will germinate and it will dominate your turf or other situations. This is Glenstone. We heard about Glenstone a little earlier today with Linda Barrett. This is back in 2016 when Glenstone was still trying to manage their turf organically. Their turf was full of Japanese stiltgrass. They've since given up trying to manage that stiltgrass in their turf because it just can't be done organically. And no, goats, sheep, they won't eat Japanese stiltgrass, and neither will our native deer. Japanese stiltgrass is from Asia, and our deer won't eat it, and not even goats will eat it. This is just what it looks like when you have Japanese stiltgrass in a lawn, and a lawn that's been treated with a standard pre-emergent to the left. So organic pre-emergent, corn gluten, that's pretty much the big one. It might be from an organic source, but it might not be. So if you're using corn gluten, that's from a GMO corn plant. Is it organic? I don't think so. But don't worry, corn gluten is not a very good pre-emergent. It's an excellent organic fertilizer, 10% nitrogen, but it is not a very good pre-emergent. Lots of studies out there. The only one that found it to be effective is the study from Iowa, which is where they happen to, develop this resource. They grow a lot of corn. They think it works great, but nobody else has found the same results. The county says clover is a friend and not your enemy. I don't disagree with that. But they say everything changed after the war, but they don't say which war, which I think would be important. It would be probably World War II, when a lot of chemicals were developed. And those chemicals take out clovers for sure, but so does Fiesta herbicide. So that's approved by the county. It's a chelate iron. If you want a clover lawn, do not put Fiesta on your lawn because it will take it out. University of Maryland has information about clover lawns. There are advantages. It mixes well with our turf varieties. It can provide an organic source of nitrogen because it's a legume, and it can fix nitrogen in the soil. And it does provide flowers and nectar for bees if you let it go to flower. There are some disadvantages. It doesn't tolerate heat, drought, and humidity. And so it tends to die out in our area in our summers. So you'll have a good stand. And then if you get a tough summer, it tends to get wiped out. Of course, in the wintertime, the top growth dies back and it leaves bare areas, which often get invaded or erode. So it doesn't grow in the shade. It's expensive, but it's not that expensive. It's affordable, but it will be wiped out by things like Fiesta. So if you've got a clover lawn, don't use Fiesta herbicide, whatever you do. And some people want the flowers for the bees, but some people might be allergic to bees, and that could be a problem with clover. And of course, as I said, it's very susceptible to southern blight, tends to get wiped out. So this is a clover lawn that was managed organically or naturally, at least, in DC. And this is a summer, and it just got wiped out. You know, the tall fescue is still there, but the clover is pretty much gone. So that is a challenge. There's a lot of weeds, things like sedges. You're not going to manage them naturally or organically. Hydrocotyl, things like pennywort, it's not really manageable anymore. So how do you manage difficult weeds? It's difficult. You might have to pull them. There are a lot of weeds. So, you know, you can learn about them. But then we have the alien invasives. So what about them? Canadian thistle. These are the county's invasive plants. Chameleon plant, wavy leaf basket grass, lesser celandine, and then Japanese stiltgrass. And the Japanese stiltgrass is framed in red because that's the one plant that they won't let you use standard herbicides to manage in your lawn. If these other species get in your lawn, you can use standard herbicides to manage them under the county's regulation, but not Japanese stiltgrass. They have not approved that. A lot of warm season grasses. We talked about Bermuda grass a little bit. Mostly what we see in our lawns is common Bermuda. It's not manageable with any products, not with synthetic or organic products. If you've got it, you're probably going to live with it. There again, we talked about Fiesta and these mineral-based herbicides. They're not organic. They're not technically even natural. They do work to some degree. A lot of information here. A lot of these things are non-selective, meaning they kill everything. A lot of them have danger labels. So you need to be careful if you're using these products. Just because they say they're organic doesn't mean they're safe. A lot of soap-based herbicides. So again, I guess to this question, a thick lawn is still the best first step in managing weeds. Use only high-quality weed-free seeds. Slice, spike, verticut. If you're going to core aerate, try to top dress or combine it with other types of aerations. Truly organic lawn care is probably a myth, especially in the Mid-Atlantic transition zone. A more accurate description would be natural lawn care. That's what I say. It might be more like a natural lawn care. You know, continue to use your common sense. You can get good results with natural lawn care. Certain pest problems are going to be difficult, but soil testing, picking proper turfgrass varieties, and proper fertilization, those are the keys. Follow the science and you can achieve good results. Is it organic? Probably not, but it's turfgrass science, and we have a lot of science to work with. So, you know, this was all about an update for the organic lawn care. I think the big update, maybe I could just throw to you, is that Laytonsville, Maryland is the last remaining municipality in Montgomery County that has not opted in to the pesticide ban. Poolsville just recently adopted it. So this is a lot of resources here, and just keep on smiling.
Hey, Eric, hey, Eric, there you go. Thank you, Eric. So thanks, Eric, that's a lot of information Eric's provided us today on many different fronts, just not turfgrass, but, you know, soil science, fertility. I know, Dick, we've got some questions that came through the chat. I know we're running a little bit over, guys, but if some of you need to go, that's fine. Thank Eric here, but I know we got some questions and some of you are interested in getting those answers. So Dick, are you there?
Yeah, Dick is there. But actually, I'm going to go ahead and do the questions.
You're doing them,
Hi, Eric.
Hello.
the very first one was, will the speaker slides be available? And I'm assuming yes, right?
The answer is
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So the second one was, and this is kind of all together, kind of a better explanation of the Montgomery County pesticide law. Uh, One confusion is, do our lawns fall under the exemptions? And then what kind of education is required for the lawn companies, and how do they work with the pesticide law?
Great questions. I mean, and I'm sorry if I wasn't more clear on that. Basically, your lawn does not fall under an exemption. You are, if you live in Montgomery County and you don't live in Laytonsville, your lawn falls under the Montgomery County pesticide ban. And that means, again, you can go to their site to get more information, but it basically means that the standard pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, all those are banned on your lawn. You can't apply them. So all the weed and feed products you see out there that are, have standard pre-emergent that are going to be for sale very soon. I'm sure the stores are stocking up. You are not allowed to apply them to your lawn, and neither are professional companies. Everybody is under the same law. If you are taking care of a lawn in greater Montgomery County, you cannot use a standard herbicide unless it is on the lists that are provided at the county's website. Professional companies in Maryland who either apply fertilizers and or pesticides, they need to be licensed, so they need to pass a test, and then their employees need to be trained, and they need to be registered, and they need to update their training every year. Everyone needs a certain number of continuing education units, so CEUs. And it's just always a struggle, but the winter is when we do a lot of that, but the training and the learning never stops. But again, even a licensed applicator, such as myself, cannot legally make applications of a standard pesticide to a lawn in Montgomery County. There are some exceptions, and that is that if there is the chance of acute economic damage, and they don't describe what that economic damage is, what the threshold is. But if you think that you're going to lose your lawn, say you do have 24 grubs per square foot, you can make a standard application of an insecticide to kill those grubs. And then within 7 days, the county wants you to file a report as to what you did, what you used, and why you did it. They don't really allow that for weeds. It's more if you're going to lose your lawn. So that's kind of it. Lawn care companies, their employees need to be trained and registered to be out on a lawn. But regardless of that, they still must follow the Montgomery County rules, which is that we can't apply standard pesticides to a lawn.
Okay, and the follow-up question was, how can the big box stores, Lowe's, Home Depot, Ace Hardware, sell Roundup without professional staff to provide information and restrict sales to the average homeowner? They have pallets of it and then can buy it.
That's a good question. It's a very broad, big question, though. It goes well beyond Montgomery County or Maryland, because FIFRA, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, Rodenticide Act, is federal. That's what regulates all pesticides. And so to get a pesticide into the market, FIFRA first have to go through federal. And then, of course, Maryland has to adopt it and say you can use it, or DC. They have their own adoption process. And that's how that happens, okay? And so it's determined that this product can be used. Now, your answer to big box stores selling these things. So interestingly, and again, Montgomery County doesn't ban the use of Roundup. So you're not going to use Roundup on your lawn, though, are you? I mean, you got a dandelion you don't want, or crabgrass, and you're going to spray your lawn with Roundup? Roundup is a non-selective systemic herbicide. It's going to be absorbed. It's going to kill your entire lawn. So it's not a standard product used on turf. It might be used, or used to be used, certainly if you were renovating your turf, killing your lawn off and starting over. Now that you can't do anymore in Montgomery County. But most of the time, Roundup is being used on non-turf areas, on driveways, sidewalks, flower beds, around gardens and trees. That's where Roundup is mostly used. And so that product is still totally usable because it isn't a lawn product necessarily. How can they sell these things? Because that's a bigger issue that goes to federal and state. The state could obviously ban Roundup if they wanted to. They're not doing it. It's pretty widely used product. But ultimately, I thought your question might go to, and I purposely didn't include this little pictogram that I took from the county, which showed commercial regulations for stores and retailers. But I didn't use it on purpose because I've been to all the big box stores around here lately in Montgomery County and some of the small hardware stores. By the Montgomery County regulation, they're supposed to have signage explaining the law and showing you that you can't use these products. You can buy them, but you can't use them on your lawn. But I found none of that to be visibly displayed. I didn't see any of the signage that's required. So, to put it bluntly, a lot of this stuff that the county has put out there is being ignored by the general public and by even the commercial establishments that are supposed to fall under its regulation.
Okay. Any special ways that you can tell us about asking lawn care companies to not bag the clippings? We have people who would like that to happen and don't know how to get it to happen.
Well, I can give you the simplest answer of all. If you have someone mowing your lawn and they're not doing it for free, you're their boss. Heck, even if they are, you might be their boss, right? It's your kid. Knock them on the back of the head softly, then kiss them and say, don't bag the clippings. If you are hiring a professional lawn care to mow your lawn, you're their boss. It's their job to do what you want. And if you can't get it, there's about 8 billion guys out there, I'm exaggerating just a little bit, who mow lawns that'll be happy to follow your direction. It shouldn't be a big deal. This is, old information that, for the most part, not 100%, but probably 92%, leaving clippings behind are beneficial. Okay. And so if you're not getting that from your service provider, you need to talk with them and you need to get that from them, or you need to talk to another service provider and get what you want. That's simple. You control that.
Okay. Best way to eliminate ground ivy.
So ground ivy is an interesting plant because it's a vine that creeps, and it everywhere a node touches the ground, it roots. And so once it starts covering stuff, you go to dig a dandelion out, it's got a taproot, you get it out. But you go to pull ground ivy and, it just breaks off. So you really need to go in there with like a soil knife, an ori knife, and you just need to lay down and just sort of cut all those nodes and just gently pull, and it starts to lift up. You can be fairly successful at that if you don't have too much. I will say that Fiesta herbicide can have some effect on ground ivy. And so if you follow the directions and you do the repeat applications at the right time of year, you can start to reduce it. It's not 100%, but it works pretty well if you keep up with it. But you can get some success with hand removing ground ivy. I've done it personally, so I know.
And I'm going to kind of combine these two. Can you address the option of introducing ground covers like ajuga, creeping thyme, or pachysandra, or mixing clover and violets? Maybe edges of lawn or areas where you're not doing a lot of trafficking.
Right. So again, there are a lot of different other types of ground covers. And again, I say other types because turf is a ground cover. It's semi-unique in that it allows itself to be walked on and mowed, and it tends to recover. And so when you have a ground cover like that, and then you want to change it, and you start looking for alternatives, you start realizing it's hard. A lot of the other ground covers, they don't respond well to walking on, and oftentimes they shouldn't be walked on, and it becomes a little difficult. So there's nothing that quite matches up with turf. But if you want to have other types of ground covers, there are definitely a lot of them out there, more than ever before. And you can incorporate them any way you would like. Now, if you want clover, you can buy clover seed. You can find it online. You might not be able to find it at a big box store. You might find it at a smaller Ace Hardware or something, but you can definitely find it online. And so there are ways, and you can just introduce that to your lawn. But if you want violets, they usually establish themselves, especially if you're not using any types of herbicides, including Fiesta. Again, they're not ideal in the sense that they disappear in the wintertime. They go dormant. They're still there, but they aren't actively really holding the soil or taking up space. So a lot of times you end up with things like, chickweed and bittercress and henbit and dead nettle and all these winter weeds that start growing as the days get shorter in October, November, and continue to grow and then go to seed this time of year. I mean, things like hairy bittercress will be going to seed soon. These warmer days we're having in February that are coming up here, we'll start seeing white flowers for sure. So in short, there are a lot of other ground covers you could try to introduce. They may not be native, but there are definitely some that might be, but ultimately they're not necessarily going to replace grass. You want to do an edge and give them a place where they can encroach? Absolutely. I love creeping thyme. That's fantastic. If you've got a walkway that has openings in it, I love creeping thyme. Pink chintz is one of my favorites. That's great. And it can take some wear and tear, but it's not going to work too well as a lawn.
Okay, and I'm getting close to the end. Can you address fireflies and how treatment for grubs might harm them? Or
yeah, that's a good question, and it's interesting because I love fireflies. One of my favorite things of all time. I'm still like a little kid. When they're out there, I'm out there going, whoa. So I've been tracking this for quite a while, and what I've noted is that there isn't a lot of scientific data that ties, direct lawn care to a reduction in fireflies. What I have found is that development has a direct tie to a decrease in light, excessive light pollution. That has a bigger effect. So will grub control affect fireflies? Perhaps it could affect their larvae, but it doesn't seem to. There doesn't seem to be a lot of data supporting that. And of course, if you're concerned about it, don't put those things down. I think if you use something like a BTG, Bacillus thuringiensis galleria, that's certainly not going to affect firefly larvae. But what I noticed is that just 2 years ago, we had a fairly moist season, and I had, it was like the galaxy Milky Way in my yard and my trees with lightning bugs, with fireflies. And I've, been taking care of my lawn here for decades now. And I noticed that even in a lot of the neighborhoods I work, and I work all over Montgomery and DC and Frederick and Howard, and there are a lot of fireflies everywhere. I saw a lot. But last year I did not. And that was, and I noted that last year was a really dry year. We talked about that earlier. The Chesapeake Bay sort of got a little improved. But I think drought has a bigger effect overall on this, and I expect that this is just a temporary reduction, and then as things change, we'll see a bigger population. But for sure, development plays a big role. Light pollution plays a big role, and of course, the misuse of pesticides plays a big role. You don't want to just apply insecticides, and I think grub control might not be as important in that sense as things that might be like mosquito controls, like the synthetic pyrethroids that might also be used for controlling things like chinch bugs. Those might have a bigger effect on lightning bugs and their larvae. So that's what the research I've done. It's ongoing. I'll be interested to see what happens in 2024 because it's already a wetter year. We've had a wetter December in 2023, a wetter January by a lot. We'll see how February, March, April shape up. And if it's a little wetter, I'd expect to hopefully see more butterflies, more lightning bugs, and probably more weeds and mosquitoes.
Okay, I think that is basically the end of our questions.
Great,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, thanks, Tina. Hey, thanks everybody. Thanks for a number of you sticking around and listening to Eric provide answers to your questions. Just want to wrap things up. I thank you all for coming here today. And I look forward to seeing some of you, hopefully face to face in the upcoming growing season here. And enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.